And now, on with our event. It is my great privilege to introduce you to Tania Ledergerber, who is an alumna of Roehampton, Surrey University in London, where she earned her Master's of Arts in International Development and Human Services. She taught for IES Abroad, instructing our internship seminar in social science and community-based learning classes at the Universidad San Francisco de Quito, USFQ for short, and Kalamazoo College. Tania also directed the International Partnership for Service Learning and Leadership Program at USFQ and spent 10 years as the resident director in Quito for Kalamazoo's college. Since 2018, Tania has been the director of the IES Quito and Galápagos Island Center and brings a wide range of international education administration experience. She has traveled and worked around the world, spending nearly 30 years devoted to environmental, community-based, and social NGOs. Please join me in welcoming Tania Ledergerber.
Thank you very much, Jody. This is a very generous presentation. Thank you very much to all of you and all the team from the advanced department. Thank you for all people that are watching and hearing and are interested about this presentation that we are going to do today. It's really my privilege to be able to host this center here in Quito and in the Galapagos. I see a lot of very familiar faces from around the world. Thank you very much for your interest in really joining us and learning from this great event of the Day of the Earth. So please, let's get started with the presentation. So welcome to celebrate the Day of the Earth Day 2021 with IES Abroad. Rediscover Quito and the Galapagos Island, IES Abroad Center. Next slide, please. I will be talking today about the Ecuador in general. Just a brief introduction, so please allow me to present my country. The location of Ecuador, it's just in the middle of the equator. We are a little bit more southern. Most of our country is the southern part of the equator. We have a population from over 17 million inhabitants, most of them living in the highlands. Another 45% in the coast, the jungle, Oriente or the Amazon region, 5.8%, and the Galapagos, 0.2%. Our land, it's a small country, but we have 4 different regions. Our land is 256,370 square kilometers. Our main city, our capital is Quito. And that's where I am right now. We are 9,350 feet above the sea level. And some other important cities like Guayaquil, Cuenca, Manta, and others more. In our currency, we use the US dollar since the January 2000, although some of our students, of our alumni here in this meeting today might recall that we have our own minted coins. So we always advise students, if they go back to their home countries, to please try to get rid or take these coins as a souvenir for them. Next slide, please. Ecuador is a mega diverse country. It has a great diversity from ecosystems, different ethnic groups settle down and live from those ecosystems as well, and within those ecosystems. And that's what we will be learning today. And we will also always remembering that we are guests of this country and not owners of the country. So we try to live as well in those sense of respecting and managing. It's our main challenge in our country and our communities. Next slide, please. So in Ecuador, We also have different ethnic groups that are located in the different regions. It's about 23 different ethnic groups in the jungle, in the highlands, in the coast, and also some in the Galapagos. And our main language is Spanish, but for some communities, their first language is Quechua and their second language is Spanish. We have over 19 different local languages, but the main one is the Quechua or Quechua as well. Next slide, please. So this is the a map of Ecuador, and these are the different regions. As you can see, it's this huge Andean chain will divide the Amazon region with the coastal line, and we will learn about their ecosystems as well. Next slide, please. Our economy and production is very diverse. We rely very much on our natural resources. We have the oil as our main income for our economy. We also have the banana. We export a lot of the bananas. We are one of the main exporters from bananas and plantains in Ecuador. We also have aquaculture and mainly the shrimp farming industry. And also flower industry is very important in the highlands. And right now, one of the most important agriculture products that we export is cacao, very important. And we are doing also a lot of, since 8 years ago, we're doing a lot of our own chocolate. International recognitions and certification for fair trade and sustainable chocolate. Ecuador has won many of those prizes. And please taste Ecuadorian chocolate, it's very good. Also, tourism is very important. Tourism is one of our main incomes as well, and we have a different ways of experiencing tourism, like ecotourism, or in the different ways we can offer that activity in Ecuador. Next slide, please. Please go ahead. Thank you. What's happening right now with the COVID, with the pandemic? We have this big organization, institution, governmental institution called COE Nacional. We all have also our local institutions that will present or will mandate certain protocols national-wise and local-wise. For example, for international travelers to mainland in Galapagos, there is a requirement of a negative test. Also, there's some random testing at the airport eventually. At national levels, wearing masks in public spaces is mandatory, social distancing, disinfecting as well, and some other restrictions on local levels. For example, transportation and mobility restrictions, quotas on restaurants, etc. We have started our plan of vaccination. We've completed the plan 0, and we're right now in the phase 1 in the different parts of Ecuador as well. Next slide, please. We just elected 2 weeks ago our president, our new president. So our current president is Lenín Moreno on the right-hand picture, just creating a state secretary from the US like 2 years ago. And he has been challenged with the pandemic and dealing with other issues as well, with the economy, which has been a great challenge for Lenín Moreno. Right now, the elected president is Guillermo Lasso, and he will be sworn into power in May 24th of this year. Next slide, please. So who are we, or who we are? At IES Quito and Galápagos Center, our goal is to create a safe, integrated, and diverse environment for all students in order to allow them to have a great academic experience while studying and traveling in the country. So let me introduce you to Jimena Paredes. She is the Student Affairs Coordinator for Quito. She's based in Quito as well. Then Cristina Lopez, she's the Student Affairs Coordinator for the Galapagos program. She's based in San Cristobal. And Juan Carlos Sanchez, he is the logistical support for our center. Next slide, please. And this is our just renovated center. So for those students that were here before 2020, you probably didn't knew this new remodeled center. We are in the heart of the commercial and business area next to a park. We're still in the same location as before. Since 2017, we are in this location, but in 2020, we remodeled this office, providing students much wider space to lounges and classrooms and spaces to be able to go around the center and enjoy their time there as well. Next slide, please. This is our alumni. So for some of you, you might be able to recognize yourself in these pictures. I would have liked to put all the pictures we have from all of the alumni, but of course we couldn't. And we also are very grateful for having the Grupo Panas, this group of local students that are joining us since a year ago or 2 years ago in all our activities with the IES students, and are always integrating them into the culture and helping them to navigate the country as well. Next slide, please. And yes, SDGs goals are very important for the world and also for IES and for our center. So this is why it's interesting that I was looking at the logo from the Ecuadorian government, Ecuador Ama la Vida. It resembles the SDGs, the International Sustainable Development Goals from UN. And we are, as a center, always including in academics and at our center also those goals as much as possible. Next slide, please. So this, I will stop talking because I really want to connect the diversities. This is about connecting diversities, and that's why I want to just very briefly show you the picture of the national parks and the ethnic groups that we have. This is a great challenge for Ecuador. It is not easy to manage all the national parks that we have in the picture on the lower part of the slide, and the ethnic groups on the center at the slide. We all have our own responsibilities to manage the best way possible, or all of our more than 50 national parks that we have in the country. And we will learn right now a little bit more about the ecosystems and also about the ethnic groups that we have in the country with our guest speakers. So next slide, please. Allow me to introduce you to our guest speaker, Dr. Hugo Valdebenito. Hugo earned his PhD in botanic from the Ohio State University, Columbus, Ohio, US in 1990. He subsequently served as a head of botanic at Charles Darwin Research Station, Galápagos Island, and since 1994 has been professor in the College of Botanical and Environmental Science at the Universidad San Francisco de Quito, our partner university in Quito, Ecuador. His interests include teaching and researching in botany, ecology, and wildlife conservation on the flora of the Galapagos Island in mainland Ecuador. Having participated in several national and international meetings, being author of more than 30 science papers. Hugo has been associated with IES Quito and Galápagos Island since 2007, teaching courses concerning the environment diversity of Ecuador. And thank you very much, Hugo, for your presentation of today. So welcome, let's welcome Hugo to the presentation he's going to give. Thank you very much. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Tania. Nice to see you all. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the environmental diversity that we have here in the country. Next, please. As you already know, Ecuador is a small country with let's say a mainland or continental area, as well as an insular area. And what is important here is this, the Andes or the Cordillera. It's in this graph, in this drawing. Here you have the highlands, which divides the country into the coastal area and into what we call the east, or the eastern part of the country, or the Amazon. Next, please. Now, Ecuador is extremely biodiverse and has been named one of the 17 megadiverse countries in the world. And what you see in this table are the 17 countries, and since Ecuador is the smallest country, is on the bottom of this list. This list is listed according to the extension or the area in square kilometers of the countries. But if you take into consideration the number of species present with the area of the country, Ecuador jumps to the very first places. Next, please. Now, just to show you how important is the diversity here in Ecuador, let me show you some figures with plant diversity present in Ecuador. As you can see, there are more or less 18,000 plant species. See the extension or the area of the country. And this number is higher than what is present in Europe and even in North America. And of course, it's a little bit smaller with other countries, but these countries are huge if you compare them with Ecuador. Definitely the biodiversity, or specifically the plant biodiversity here, is extremely high. Next, please. Now, in Ecuador, we have more or less 9 main ecosystem or major ecosystems that go from the Galapagos to the ocean, and I'm going to describe a little bit each one of these ecosystems. And remember that ecosystem is an area characterized by the flora and the fauna, the climate that is present there. So let's start with the first ecosystem, please. Our unique in the world, actually, ecosystem is the Galapagos. The Galapagos is approximately to more or less 600 miles or 1,000 kilometers to the western part, to the west of the mainland. And the Galapagos consists of a marine reserve as well as a national park. And that means, in other words, that we are protecting not only the insular area with plants and animals present there, but also what is present in the ocean, in what we call the marine reserve. Next. The Galapagos National Park is more or less conformed by these 12 major islands, and 90% of this area is protected as a national park, and the remaining 3% is inhabited by residents. And the number of residents is more or less 35,000 living there. Next. Now, Galapagos is very interesting because the habitat diversity is amazing. I mean, it changes from the lowlands to the highlands. The topography or the shape of the islands is more or less what you see here. Sometimes this go higher than 900 meters, sometimes lower than that. But what's as important is that you can differentiate different areas or zones as you go up. As you go up, the humidity increases, and in that way you will see from the lowlands lava fields extremely dry, up to on the highlands forests like what you see here on the upper part of the slide. Next, please. And of course, if you go to the Galapagos, actually you have to go if you haven't been there. One of the really interesting things that you have to see there is these landscapes. They're amazing, unique. Some of them are kind of these lunar, the moon landscape, very interesting. But Galapagos is not only interesting for this landscape, but also, next please, for the species that are endemic on the islands. And that means they're unique to the islands. And all of the reptiles are endemic. The birds, more or less 50%, and mammals, 88%. Next. And here you can see some of the representatives, very unique, like the marine iguana. Nowhere else in the world you'll be able to see a marine iguana. Of course, the Galapagos penguins, the land iguanas, and of course, the land tortoises, very important. Yeah, they are different species according to the shell shape. Next, please. And birds also very unique, like the blue-footed boobies and the Nazca boobies or the albatrosses, and of course the frigate bird. Next. But not only animals are unique to the Galapagos, but also the vegetation. Most of the cacti, for example, are endemic. They live there, only some of these species. Next, please. And of course, you have to remember that Charles Darwin, he visited the islands back in 1835. He spent 5 weeks there. And when he visited the islands, he realized how the environment is shaping the species living there. For example, here you can see the land iguana, the land tortoises, and you can see how the shell shape changes according to what they feed from. Like here from the opuntias, and also another example is with Darwin's finches, where the beaks are different according to the seeds. Next. And of course, the insular part, the islands have environmental problems, like the introduced organisms like animals and plants, in animals, especially the goats. And of course, we have residents living there, as I said before, more or less 33,000. And also we have tourism. Over 200,000 tourists visit the islands 2 years ago. Next, please. And just to show you how the environment can change with these goats, for example, these introduced animals, I want to show you these 2 pictures. Next, please. How the vegetation can change, how the goats are a promoting factor of disappearing the vegetation there. Next. And of course, the marine reserve also have environmental problems, like international fishing. We have visit of international fleet the last year in November, more or less, shark finning, and of course, overfishing. The local government, not only the government in Galapagos, but also the Ecuadorian government, what he's doing, the government is doing, is trying to join efforts with other countries from Costa Rica to Peru in order to control this illegal fishing. Next, please. Now, second interesting ecosystem that we have is the Amazon, or the tropical rainforest, which is on the eastern part of the country. Next. And as you already may know, the tropical forest in general is an ecosystem with the highest biodiversity in the world. And this Amazon rainforest is present not only in Ecuador, but other countries here in South America. Next, please. And once again, you have representatives and coming from the Amazon, the white caiman, black caiman, giant otter, what's seen, very unique bird in the Amazon. And of course, our king of the jungle, the jaguar anacondas. Please, next. And of course, monkeys, you love monkeys. This is the place that you have to come here. Over 19 species in our Amazon. Next, please. And of course, the macaw species, they are unique, as you already know, right? Because of the unique feathers, the colors, They are very, very beautiful. 70 species present in our Amazon. Next. And of course, trees are not the exception. Over 8,000 tree species in the Amazon, from vines to huge, large trees adapted to different environments. Next. And of course, also we have environmental problems in the Amazon, and that's the presence of oil companies which are drilling the oil in areas. This kind of overlapping between the drilling and the national parks. The national parks are here on green. And of course, some way, or our Ministry of Environment and Water, they're trying to establish some policies in order to regulate this contamination, this pollution. Next. The Paramo, this is on the third ecosystem. This is on the highlands, over 9,000 feet. That goes from Costa Rica to northern Peru. And here in the country is on the two parts of our Andes. Next. The Paramo is, of course, a highland over 9,000 feet, as I mentioned before. And not only plants, but also animals are adapted to this very harsh environment. And for example, the temperature changes in just one day, in 24 hours, from 33 Fahrenheit at night to 75 during the day. Next. And this is some of the landscape possible to see there, from grasses to sandy areas, more woody areas, and with ponds or lake, not lake, but lagoons. Next. And the vegetation also have adaptations, of course, like small leaves, waxy surfaces, and the biodiversity is low because of the environment, right? And what is really interesting is that there is a high endemism in this area, because it's just that is because the summit or this area is very unique, and the vegetation has been adapted to those to that unique environment. Next. Some animals and birds, of course, the condor, right? The vicuna and the llama, these are camelids, right? This is the unique bear that we have in South America, and of course, deers. Next. Environmental problems, of course, we do have in the Paramos reforestation with pines, with introduced species, agriculture, and grazing. Next. And this picture is just to show this is just to show you how the glaciers, or in general, the global warming, how it's affecting these areas. And you can see how the snow and the glaciers are retreating to higher areas of the volcanoes. Next. The Andean cloud forest is present in the tropical area, and in Ecuador is on the external slopes here. Next. And it's a very irregular, but with a really, really high biodiversity, as high as present in the Amazon. And what is characteristic of this Andean cloud forest is that usually in the afternoon is very foggy, very cloudy. Next. The altitude is from 3,000 to 9,000 feet. The vegetation is quite dense, as you see here, and even denser than in the Amazon. Next. Some representatives, of course, I know you love the toucans, for example, once again, like the macaws, very colorful, right? And cock of the rock, this is very characteristic near to Quito, actually. Next. Animals, mammals, of course, you have the ocelot here. There is a picture of a knight, and a puma, and the spectral bear again. And these two pictures were taken in a camera trap project that we have very close to Quito. Next. Orchids, maybe you all know the orchids, beautiful flowers, and we have over 4,000 species here that represent more or less 17, almost 20% of the total number of species worldwide. And in the US, just a comparison, there are more or less 300 species. And since we have so many species in the country and in the Andean cloud forest, we call Quito the orchid capital of the world. And next. By the same token, hummingbirds are very abundant here, 132 species, more or less 40% out of the 300 species that we have in the world. That is the reason why Ecuador is called the watcher's paradise. Next. Tourism is quite common, popular here in the Andean cloud forest, where you can do this zip canopy or kayaking, or also this cable car is quite common. So tourism is very attractive in this area. Next. Mangroves is another ecosystem. As you may know, mangroves grow close to the oceans here. And unfortunately, the problem with the mangroves is deforestation. And so this area are being occupied by shrimp farms. Next. Shrimp farms. Interandean Valley is very dry, as you can see in the picture. And that is because the rainfall coming from the west or from the east is stopped here on the external slopes. So there is almost no rainfall inside of these valleys. Next. The coastal dry ecosystem is in the western part of the country, a very dry area, lot of reptiles and vegetation like cacti, adapted, of course, to this dry environment. Next. Wetlands are like lagoons on the mainland, and they are distributed all along the country, from the Galápagos to the coast, in the Interandean valleys, and of course in the Amazon. Next. And the ocean is quite important, not just because of the natural resources that represent, but also because of the unique species. And unfortunately, once again, we have this heavy fishing, in the ocean. Next. And finally, just I want to say that Ecuador is a country with one of the highest biodiversities in the world, with a high variety of ecosystems, with a lot of touristic attractions, as well as scientific attractions. And of course, also we have universities and scientific research stations at this different ecosystem, where you can come and visit the university and come and do research. And I want to just finish saying 3 words: come to Ecuador. Please come to Ecuador. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugo. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Let's continue right now with our second guest speaker, Dr. Angelica Ordoñez. Angelica earned her doctorate in social sciences with honors at the School of Social Sciences in Paris, France. She has worked in various institutions of higher education. She is currently a teacher and researcher at the Universidad Andina Simón Bolívar in the area of social and global studies in Quito, Ecuador. Her topic of interest are gender, political, ecology, climate change, socio-natural disaster, social vulnerability, water, environment, society relationship, interculturality, and disabilities. Angelica has been teaching since 2007 at IES Quito and Galápagos Island Center classes such as the cultural diversity of Ecuador, ecological anthropology, community-based learning. Let's welcome her on the talk of cultural diversity and environmental conflicts. Thank you very much, Angelica.
Thank you, Tania. Thank you for your presentation, for your introduction. I'm going to talk about today about cultural diversity and environmental conflicts. Thank you. Next, please. Well, Ecuador, as you have seen, is one of the most diverse countries in the world. Its biological diversity is related to its cultural diversity, and this is no coincidence. In fact, humans create biological diversity through the domestication and breeding of plants and animals. Social diversity, on the other hand, is built and sustained in societies that are respectful of differences, like the Ecuadorian society. So here you can see that we have a very robust mestizo population, and against common sense, indigenous and Afro-descendant groups are not as big as in other Latin American countries. In 2001, there were more white people than indigenous people by auto definition. And in 2010, there were less white, more indigenous, but also more Afro-descendants and Montubio population. So you can see here diversity. Next, please. However, indigenous groups are not so big, but they are very diverse. So we have 14 nationalities and 18 pueblos, most of them located at the highlands and at the Amazon, but also at the coast and Galapagos. Next, please. Here you can see that Quechua is the biggest nationality by far, and the second one is Shuar. There are other nationalities, but they are very, very small, and some of them are about to extinguish, which is really sad. Next, please. And pueblos, regarding pueblos, which are Quechua speaking groups, Puruá is the biggest one at Chimborazo, Pansaleo at Cotopaxi is the second one, and Otavalo is the third one in number, but the most famous one, maybe the most well-known in the world. Next, please. There are 10 indigenous languages spoken in Ecuador. Sadly, fewer and fewer indigenous groups communicate in their native language. So only 34% of them speak only their language. However, 28% of them speak their indigenous language and Spanish. Next, please. So I'm going to talk about very briefly, about two relevant cases of social environmental conflicts. They affect mostly vulnerable groups, regardless of their ethnicity. However, there is a strong relationship between ethnicity and poverty. Next, please. Most environmental conflicts involve indigenous population, and the reason is that indigenous population live at places where natural resources have not been exploited at industrial pace by humans. And we associate indigenous groups as the guardians of nature, which they are not. All human groups have equal responsibility in protecting the environment. But indigenous relationship towards nature has prevented them to deplete natural resources as fast as in other places. Next, please. At the same time, because of our colonial past, access to land and water in Ecuador is highly unequal. Ecuador has one of the highest inequality rates in land access, and in water use, 60% of our water goes to irrigation, 33% to human consumption, and 7% to industrial use. More and more water is currently used in higher percentages for mining. Next, please. So I'm going to talk about the first environmental conflict, access to water after an earthquake. So 5 years and a week ago, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake occurred at Manabí, the northern coast of Ecuador, and it was a devastating disaster which killed several hundred people. In that catastrophic context, one main concern was access to water, a vital element, and water donations from all over the country were sent to the earthquake epicenter. Next, please. Here, well, we see that disasters are not only natural disasters, but they unfold from social and historical constructions that reflect power relations. Next, please. And as we all know, women and girls are most vulnerable among affected groups, but they are not passive victims. Next, please. So I'm not going to read this, but at Jama and Pedernales, which were very hit by the earthquake, 70 to 86% of the population is poor. Next, please. Here I will present three female grassroots leaders of the affected communities. They reflect on unequal access to water and its challenges. So I'm very briefly going to talk about Mercedes Toral, who was managing water at Coaque Pedernales before the earthquake and after the earthquake. And the night of the earthquake was a very rainy night. And the day after, they didn't have electricity nor water. So she says, at the interview of a research that I made, women work at their homes and we feel water scarcity. Men just come home and everything is solved. We suffer and we want to provide water to every family member. And then she said, I had to fix everything. Water pumps, lack of electricity. Senawa taught me to put chlorine to water to make it safe for human consumption. So she solved the problem. Next, please. Alicia Zambrano, who lives in Punta Blanca, Jama, on the other hand, speaks about sharing water with people that do not have access to it. And she said, I had to convince my brother to allow the water well located in his private land for access to all the population. He did not want it at first, but I showed him it would benefit his children too. And she also said, I want water meters in every house. I want to save water for the future. I want to avoid water waste. And she is a very strong advocate of water community management. Next, please. Diana Moscoso was at Canoa San Vicente providing water for the people hit by the earthquake. And she said, bottled water is a private business and nobody regulates its price. This is very important because most of the population at Manabí rely on bottled water. They cannot drink the water that comes on pipes if they have it at all. And she says there is no water management regulation. Practices do not respect the law of using water first for the people, then for crops or for golf courts irrigation. Next, please. Last, I will underline the importance of having nature as subject of rights in our constitution. Next, please. So in Article 79 of our 2008 Constitution, it says that nature has the right to be respected in its existence, in the regeneration of its vital cycles, structure, functions, and evolutive process. And only Ecuadorian Constitution has this type of declaration. It's the most progressive one on the world. Next, please. What does nature right means? Nature is a subject and not an object, and humans can act as legal defenders of nature rights. And it applies whenever there are global or systemic threats over species or ecosystems. It is preventive, but it also can ask for reparation, and it cannot act, for example, to protect domestic animals. Next, please. So how does it work? One individual, institution, or group can represent nature rights. I just read what they are. And it applies to every environmental rule because our constitution is the main legal framework in our country. Until 2018, there were 30 cases legally registered. 8 of them have been lost, but one of them stopped mining at the community of Rio Blanco in Azuay. So there is hope. Next, please. To finish, I will say that community stewardship of nature and commons may be a way to protect nature, but also to prevent environmental conflicts. And this is my big lesson from Earth Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Angelica. This is a great lesson for all of us in a great challenge to try to put our little grain every day to protect this great world and this great country as well. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for your presentations, Hugo and Angelica. Next slide, please. And remember, each of us, each of you make the difference here and around the world. And next slide, please. This is IES Quito and Galápagos Islands. And now we're going to open the space for question, answers, comments. I will hand it over to Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Jerzyk, and if you have questions for any of our wonderful panelists today, please post them in chat, and we'll call on you or post them to the specific person who can answer them. And while we're waiting for questions, I'll just say I want to thank our wonderful panelists, our staff people at our Quito Center for presenting a wonderful presentation today. They certainly reminded us what a unique and diverse country Ecuador is. Since we opened that program, over 1,400 students have studied in Ecuador. We have over 1,400 alums from that area, and we at IES are always working to make study abroad available to all students who want to study abroad. And to that end, we have a terrific day, May 12th, called Opportunities Abroad coming up, when we're going to zoom around the world and visit all of the IES centers and raise $500,000 for scholarships so that we can continue to make that possible as the world reopens. So looks like we have one question here. It says from Chris that are all the islands open, the Galapagos Islands open for tourism right now? So I don't know which of our panelists might want to take that maybe.
Tania, do you want to answer it?
Yes, it's fine. Yes, thank you very much, Chris, for your question. In fact, yes, they're open for tourism. There are regulations, as I said before, also for the mainland and for the Galapagos. You need to have to present a negative COVID test or also proof of vaccination as well, one or the other. And you have to do certain other formalities in terms of filling out a form that will, with questions if you go to the Galapagos. But there are tourists visiting the Galapagos right now, and they are specific regulations locally, depending on the moment of your traveling. You probably might check those out. Probably certain, depending on the situation of the pandemic, might be certain mobility restrictions, but probably not a lot. But there's islands are open right now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we have another question from Jody asking what the impact of the reduction in tourism during the pandemic, what has that had on Ecuador and the Galapagos?
Yes, I mean, indeed. Of course, since there are no much tourists now, that means, in other words, less contamination and for example, less garbage, for example, because that stays on the Galapagos. And so in general, of course, I mean, animals, they're more somehow, well, always have been friendly animals in Galapagos, of course, but now even more, see what I mean? So definitely, yeah, the pandemic has benefit the islands. I mean, and not only the islands here, the mainland also, and the different ecosystems, right? Yep.
Thank you, Hugo. We have another question from Allison where she's asking, does pop culture or does the media sometimes misrepresent Ecuador in any way?
Sorry, misrepresenting, like
is it not true to the way Ecuador really is? Is there misunderstandings about what the country is like?
Angelica, go ahead.
Yeah, I might try to answer that question. I think that not only in Ecuador, in everywhere in the world, people think that indigenous people are all the same, and they don't acknowledge the diversity of indigenous people. And that is the biggest mispresentation. So they assume that they all travel the same way, they all live the same way, they all wear feathers, they all want to preserve the environment, they are part of the same social class, or they speak the same language, or even they vote for the same candidate. That's not true. It's very diverse. And the richness of anthropology is discovering that. However, media is always trying to unify, homogenize indigenous populations. I would say that.
Okay, thank you, Angelica. A question from John, who asks, is there a way that people in the United States can support the environmental biodiversity of Ecuador and the Galapagos? That's a big question.
Hugo, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, for example, for Galapagos, talking about specifically Galapagos, the Charles Darwin Research Station through the Charles Darwin Foundation, they have a web page and where you can donate, make donations in order to preserve or trying to help in the conservation of the Galapagos. And at the country level, actually, I don't know as individual. I know that there are NGOs, right? Like the Nature Conservancy, for example, International Conservation, WWF, where they are funding different programs, conservation programs here on the mainland. But I think they are collecting the money. I mean, these NGOs are collecting the money, and they allocate those funds to the conservation on the mainland.
Fantastic. Thank you. One more question here in the chat from Lily. And she asks, is it possible to visit the Shaur, S-H-A-U-R, and study their healing techniques with them? She had seen a YouTube video about their work. Angelica,
yeah. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. The Shuar community is one of the first to organize. They have their organizations since the 70s. So they are very well organized, and they have been visited by several anthropologists that became famous afterwards because they have written about Shuar practices, cultural practices. So I would say strongly yes. You would have to contact the organization and see where you can fit, because they are located in several places all over the, not all over the country, but at least at 2 places at the Amazon. So you might want to research where you want to go, and they are open to that. But before, for example, anthropologists, think about the most famous one, became famous writing about the Shuar, but he didn't write in Spanish, or he didn't give back his research. So today, indigenous organizations are very aware of that, and they sometimes ask for a retribution. That doesn't mean money. It means what you give back to the community. So I would say yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I want to just thank again our wonderful presenters today from our IES Quito and Galápagos Center for preparing such a wonderful presentation and celebration of this year's Earth Day. There is a link to an event survey. We'd love to hear what you thought about today's presentation. That's in chat if you want to click on it. And now we have a really special treat for you. Christina Lopez, who is stationed out in the Galapagos Islands, has prepared a video. It runs about 6 minutes here, and we're going to leave you with that very special video.
My name is Jose Guerrero. I live in San Cristobal Island, and I've been lucky to receive a small grant from the Galapagos Science Center that they offer this grant within the context of the COVID. And the idea was to create some opportunities to reactivate the economy for people like me that lost their jobs. In my case, I was a guide, and because of COVID, obviously tourism has declined dramatically. So I was able to apply to this grant, and what I'm focusing on my project is using photography as a tool for empowerment of young people. And what we are studying is the urban conditions in San Cristobal and how these affect health in general in the community. So it has been a very nice process of training with a group of around 11 teenagers and young people from San Cristobal Island. So the process involved a few workshops related with composition, light, different techniques of photography. The idea is that the participants, who are local young people, they will use photography as a way of studying their environment. So even we live in a national park area, sometimes we do not have opportunities to go around and explore this national park, or even in the urban areas there are not enough facilities for us to explore, to do biking, to walk, or to feel safe when we are doing some of these physical activities. So it was very interesting to see how these young people, or now young photographers, saw their town. They, in some way, these people is using photography to have new eyes and new ways of understanding what we have around. So after a process of about 5 months, we ended up with about 2,000 pictures or photographs. From those 2,000, obviously we are not using all of them, so we selected around 33 pictures, which we used to produce an exhibition in the Galápagos National Park Interpretation Center. And with that exhibition, the idea is to reach the local community, but also at some point the authorities, just to show what are the barriers that young people find, and that in some way that it's preventing them to have a more healthy life. So some of the topics that they found are related with food, with physical activity, with socializing, and how the town, how the urban environment makes those 3 topics more difficult, or in some cases also some opportunities around those topics. So for example, they are finding that there is a lot of opportunities to have more urban gardens, or they found also that there are a lot of spaces that they could have a little bit more facilities with not necessarily with a lot of investment, but they could have better chances to go and swim, or chances to bike in some spaces with just a tiny investment. Or the same thing about socializing. They think that there are places that if probably we plant more trees or we create some shade, it will be nice for them to socialize in those areas. So the pictures are really nice, they are powerful, they tell some good stories about the daily life of San Cristobal, and we hope that also it will reach the authorities and in some way produce some kind of positive social change.
Hi everyone, my name is Ordoñez. I'm the leader of Huertos Isla Bonita project. This is a project that is supported by Galápagos Science Center, by San Francisco University. We have been blessed with some funds, and we have started this beautiful project that have born the need of some families. During the lockdown of COVID-19 in the Galapagos, all the tourism was evacuated and most of the operations was shut down completely. This left most of people living in the Galapagos without employment, without incomes, and as mainland was struggling, all the cargo was slowing down. We got run of food, and suddenly people immediately got efforts into the gardens, into creating their own food sources, and we have seen they were struggling, looking for seeds. They didn't have tools, so they used a spoon or something like that, and anything that they can find around. And the idea of this project is helping these families to get seeds, to get the tools, to get the knowledge they need in order to produce their food. With that idea, we have started, we are more than 100 families now. We are giving seminars, sharing knowledge, experiences, what to do with with animals in our crops, how we can propagate some plants and more. Okay, we have made compost, biosol, bokashi, and all these exquisite items that help our food crops to grow, to give more production. We have shared with the community with some tools that help them to go in their activities during the gardening, and we have seen some community gardens flourishing in the community, which is amazing. We have 2 already identified and they're working very well. One of them is share food with the neighbors, so there's more than 6 families working in that garden, more than 20 individuals, and there's another one who are using a little space at the sidewalk and in between the streets, and they're planting there for anyone, whoever they need, they can go through and collect food. So they're beautiful initiatives that I think they're example for the world.